Hey guys, I want to talk to you a little bit about this thing called the Renaissance or the Renaissance, which is basically what happened right after the end of the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages was this 800 years or so of things that were really tough. It was feudalism, where peasants and serfs were at the bottom, and it was a time where very few people could read or write. No real learning, nothing new in science or architecture was happening. And then at the end of the Middle Ages, feudalism begins to die because of things like the Crusades and the plague. And when that happens, there's this thing called the Renaissance, where people have new ideas and new thinking in art and science and math and all this, and it basically changes the world and leads us into what we're living now called the modern era. Okay, so the Renaissance really is a French word. Renaissance means rebirth, and it was a rebirth in both art and in learning. Okay, and it's just a basic, like, everybody just starts to change their thinking. And it started and stressed the importance of being an individual instead of just do what you're told because the king said it or the vassal above you said to do it or because the church said it. People started to think, no, I matter and I'm going to make decisions for myself. And they started to believe that they could just change the world. Another thing that happened is people became less religious and became more secular. Secular just simply means without God or, not of God. And so they started to get interested in the world and science and things of the world instead of heaven. So, science and math and all that will increase. And then there was this philosophy that really had started back in the ancient Greek and Roman days called humanism. And it starts to grow during the Renaissance. It's this idea that really the individual is important and humans are important, not just the good of feudalism and working the manor, like everybody matters. And then another thing happens during this time is this huge invention by a German man named Johannes Gutenberg. He invents the first real printing press. The Chinese had invented one that was kind of worked, but this one was awesome, and it was like they could print books really fast, and it will spread the English language all over Europe. And the Bible, which was only written in Latin and only read by the priest and the religious people, was now able to be read by everybody. And they start to put it in all kinds of languages. And the printing press is huge because now people are going to start learning how to read and write. Cheap to make books, and they make them, and people learn how to read and to write and to think for themselves. So new ideas are starting to change the world. Okay, in science, this really grows, especially after the Crusades, because the Muslims are so smart and very good at science that, remember, they were trading. The Europeans, the Christians, and the Muslims are trading after the wars. And so they get these new ideas about human anatomy and medicine and stars and planets. And Europe starts to really get smart at that stuff. Leonardo da Vinci, who's known for painting the Mona Lisa, but he was also a great engineer, scientist, inventor, artist. He invented, even back then, 500 years ago, the first glider, something that might work like a helicopter, and a parachute. All really smart ideas. He was just a super smart, creative person. And another big part of the Renaissance is this idea of new art, new way of looking at the way they painted. It's called perspective, and it makes a drawing look 3D, three-dimensional instead of two-dimensional. So when you look at something, it looks like it has depth, like you could step into the picture. They also began to use light and shadows to show emotion, and I'll show you a couple pictures of that in a little bit. Some other great Italian artists from this time frame, of course, was Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, Sanzio, and Michelangelo Buonarroti. And if you notice, they look like Ninja Turtles, aren't they? Leonardo, Raphael, that's where they got their names. Anyway, great artist, very famous still today. When it came to Italian art, Leonardo was from Florence, and he really loved to show emotions in his paintings. His best known really is The Last Supper, which shows Jesus and his disciples, and their last dinner, and then the Mona Lisa, which most of you know. Michelangelo was a great painter, sculptor, and architect. He loved to show pictures of God's beauty, very religious. And his most famous work was the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Sometime next week I'll show you that. And then, of course, this statue called David, which I can't show you because he's naked, but the famous King David of back in the Old Testament, okay? And he did a really great sculpture of that. All right, let's finish up. The Renaissance was all over Europe, but also in England, which is part of Europe. And they were more about the writing. And it was really about a guy named William Shakespeare. Maybe you know Romeo and Juliet or Hamlet or Macbeth. These are his famous writings. Many people still read him and all that today. Pretty amazing. His plays are popular, still movies made for him. So the Renaissance in England was more about writing. Now I want to show you a couple pictures real quick. Excuse me. This is a Middle Age picture. In other words, during medieval times. Notice that it is not very colorful, and it's definitely two-dimensional. It's kind of cartoony looking, and the colors are bad, but everything's flat and comic strip looking. It just doesn't look real, and the paint they used was just not very brilliant and bright. Now I want to show you a Renaissance picture, the Mona Lisa, and notice like it's three-dimensional. It's not flat. Like it looks like you could grab her chin if you wanted, and then look down here in the folds in her dress, okay, and the shadowing here in her thumbs, between her fingers, and then look back here, and it looks like you could step into that picture and go on and on and on. It's just really an amazing work of perspective. And then another view of it at the top here is the famous Last Supper, and that's the actual Last Supper, and it's kind of falling apart. It's painted on the wall, but this is Jesus and his disciples. Vivid colors when it was really done. Here's the digital remake of that. So it's just been copied, but look at how three-dimensional it is. It looks like you can jump in that room, and all the disciples here look like they're like, what? Jesus has just told them, hey, tomorrow I'm going to go and they're going to kill me. And they're like, what? They don't understand. But anyway, that's an example of three-dimension and perspective and how it changed the world, the world of art. So that's really it, guys. The Renaissance was this new ideas, new ways of thinking, that a human being, the individual mattered. You don't just do what you're told. You can think for yourself. So pretty important time, known as the Renaissance or the Renaissance. All right. You guys have a great day.